You are your own barrier. And if you push yourself, it's quite amazing what you can accomplish.
You can't always get what you want, but sometimes you get what you need.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Entrepreneurship 101. We have a very exciting session tonight. This is the final session in our Meet the Entrepreneur series, where you'll have an opportunity to hear firsthand from successful entrepreneurs in the health technology sector. This is an opportunity where you have time to ask them questions about some of the challenges that you're facing and get their advice on how to approach those challenges and succeed in your startups. Followed by the session, we're actually going a little bit longer. So on the agenda, it says that we're ending at 7:30, and that is to allow extra time for you to connect with the entrepreneurs. And we'd like to invite you to stay afterwards for a networking reception. We'll have coffee and refreshments for you as well. So please do stick around if you can. Moderating tonight's panel, I'd like to introduce Zayna Khayat. Zayna leads the MaRS Health Group and is the director of our MaRS Excite program. She plays a critical role in helping MaRS clients get their innovations adopted by healthcare systems in Ontario as well as around the world. Zayna was previously Director of Development at the Ivey International Centre for Health Innovation, where she is also currently an adjunct faculty member. Prior to her time at Ivey, Zayna had an 11-year career in strategy consulting with the Boston Consulting Group's Toronto office as well as Secor Consulting. Please welcome Zayna to introduce our panelists tonight.
Okay, hi everyone. So how many of you are in health? Something in health? Okay, the rest of you are going to be in health after the end of tonight, because once you do health, you can't go back. It's so fundamental and so exciting. So I get the honor and the privilege of working morning and night in health innovation with about 300 young health companies that we support and some really interesting programs in the Ontario health system to help our Ontario health system adopt and diffuse the great technologies that we build. One of the things we do in terms of matching our young companies to needed capital, because that's the fuel, is an event called HealthKick, which we put on last year for the first time, where we bring the investors, we bring some curated ventures, and they meet. And we also kind of had an award process last year across 3 streams: pharmaceuticals, devices, and health IT, and the winners of each stream are your panel tonight. And so I'm going to bring them up here. So we have Jeff Ruby from Newtopia, the founder and CEO. So I'll have each of you guys come up, and then we'll get started. Don Stewart from PlantForm, and Steve Plymale from Profound. And so what we're going to do is really focus today on their stories as founders and as CEOs of in an industry that innovation and starting a company is really tough on a good day. In health, it's particularly difficult. It's highly regulated. It has not modernized and embraced innovation at the pace of pretty much the rest of society. And yet these fellows wake up every day and are trying to really fix some really big pain points with people in our society who are suffering. And so we're going to talk about why they do what they do, how they've evolved as an entrepreneur, and see where that gets us. So maybe we'll start with going through with each of you. Just tell us a little bit about you as an entrepreneur and a little bit about your company, and then we're going to dive into some questions. So we'll start with you, Jeff.
Great. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be back at one of these sessions, and I'm really delighted to answer any questions as well, so please approach me afterward. So I'm Jeff Ruby. I'm the founder and CEO of Newtopia. I'm an accidental health entrepreneur. And I say that because I actually had no design to get into this. I did my JD MBA here in Toronto and was headed toward a career in corporate law. I arrived there and just wasn't the right fit for me. And 4 days later, after resigning from my associate post, I got a call from my father, who at 54 had just been diagnosed with abdominal cancer. And never mind, his world was upside down, but my kind of family's health and my career was upside down. And it was really through my dad's experience that introduced me to 2 lessons that I've taken through the last 14 years and 4 health startups, if you can believe 4. The first is I fundamentally don't believe we have a healthcare system. I think what we call as healthcare is functioning sick care, and it's pretty much left up to each of us to figure out how to stay out of it. And by and large, we guess wildly at it and until we slam into the sick care system. And the second lesson is, was sitting at the oncologist's office with my father. The first question out of his mouth is, "Doctor, how did I get this?" And the oncologist came back pretty quick and said, "Well, Mr. Ruby, I think a lot of this has to do with some unlucky genetics and your lifestyle choices." And I was struck by the answer because I have to say I had no idea what the hell he was talking about at that time. I do now, but I was struck with the fact that here I was sharing those same genes and having no clue about what healthy lifestyle choices meant. And so that really set me on a 14-year odyssey. 4 startups later, Newtopia really provides the plan and inspiration that I think had my father had it, he'd still be here. I now have it, and we've got a scalable platform to deliver it to every person on the planet affordably. So that's me.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. Stephen.
My name is Stephen Plymale. I'm the CEO of Profound Medical. I always start out introducing Profound as a huge company in its infancy. We are a medical device manufacturer that's developing a treatment for localized prostate cancer using a minimally invasive technique and real-time image guidance. And I was originally introduced to the company through an invitation to join the board of directors, and took an acute interest in a very small, talented group of people that were on an amazing journey to commercialize one of the most complex technologies I have ever seen. And I've been in medical devices for my whole professional career, and thought they could use all the help they could get, and having some experience in this area, I thought it would be a great assignment. Not long after I joined the board, the company eventually became funded with a Series A, which gave them the resources to get ready to commercialize, and we started looking as a board for the right talent to bring the technology forward, and that was a challenging assignment. And after repeated invitations from the board for me to look at this, because I had done it before, I had taken advantage of an invitation to go over to Sunnybrook Research and look at the technology closely, and saw that it did exactly what they said it would do, and thought, this is amazing. So I drank the proverbial Kool-Aid and took advantage of an invitation to step in as CEO and help the company grow. We're now 26 people, and we've completed our phase 1 safety feasibility study, and are now ready to bring it forward into commercialization. This is a very exciting period for any company that's ready to go to market, and I'm delighted to be involved, and I guess I'll leave it at that for now.
Have you been an entrepreneur in your whole career, or were you more with established companies?
For the most part, I've been in more advanced companies. In one of the previous startups I was involved in, I came along, I guess, around employee number 20 for another technology, not dissimilar to this in that it was an ablative technology that treated with cold instead of heat. Our technology is a heat-based therapy for treating prostate tissue. But I've also been in sort of mid-stage growth companies, and enjoyed the experience of ramping up and helping companies grow through that phase of their evolution.
Great. Okay, Don.
Yeah, okay, so it's great to have an opportunity to talk to everybody. So I'm a Scot, and I'm just back from Scotland from a wedding. And in Scotland, there are basically 2 types of people. There are aggressive people who drink a lot. I'm one of them. And there are aggressive people who drink tea. And unfortunately, this was one of those weddings. So it was a little boring. But
this is on video, by the way,
That's
Don?
good,
Okay.
that's good. I'm good with that. There's actually quite a Scottish mafia here in Canada who are in the biotechnology industry. There's quite a number of people. And it is actually quite a pleasure to have the opportunity to work with some of these people and hire them into our company, even though some of them are tea drinkers. So I'm a biochemist by background. I studied at the Royal College of Surgeons, which is part of London University in England. And I was a postdoc at the University of Alberta, and then joined Cangene Corporation, which at that time was a startup company in Mississauga. I was the 8th employee on site, so not a founder, but a very early employee. I left the company 23 years later, having worked in R&D development. I I ran contract manufacturing for the company, which was done in England and Winnipeg and Toronto. I ran a clinical trial, and actually thought it was pretty easy to run a company like that. We made a lot of money from the stock, but over a long time, it took a long time. I bought myself a house in Rosedale for cash. And so we started up PlantForm in 2008, and it's a spin out from the University of Guelph. We're focused on reducing the cost of the healthcare, provision of healthcare. We use tobacco as a production system, so instead of using fermentation, we produce biological drugs at very low cost. So this is actually, I think this is the 5th company that I've been involved in as a startup. 2 of them are still running, PlantForm and a consulting company called Alba Biologics. One of them, we'll come to that last. 2 of them never got started. We tried to start a company spinning out interferon technology from the U of T, and another similar type of company in the services area, but we never got them off the ground. And the other company I actually closed by shutting down the bank account in a moment of crisis for the company. Wow. So quite a broad range of different things, mainly in the biotech area, but the company I shut down was a real estate company where we bought and flipped houses in Leslieville. So that's...
Great. So we've got the full spectrum, right? Preventing severe illness from ever onsetting in the first place. Minimally invasive methods to treat a pretty severe illness, which really replaces hardcore surgery and difficult stuff and tough drugs, and then completely novel ways to produce medicines. So that's the spectrum, and it's not a surprise these fellows and their companies won HealthKick. So on HealthKick, has everyone put their business card in the basket? Because we are gonna draw for one of you to get a $350 value ticket to the event and hang out with 40 startups and 200 investors. So if you haven't, I don't know, somebody can come around with that. Okay, so we've got a bit of a taste for your life. So maybe we'll start with this question. You know, did you ever think you were gonna be an entrepreneur while you were either in your training or building your career? And if you did, what's similar or different from what you thought entrepreneurship was, you know, 5, 10, 15 years later? Who wants to jump at that one? Like, were you born thinking you were going to run a company, or I don't know?
You know, I think taking on the challenge of leading a company at any stage is, you know, it's a gutsy thing to do. And I think it really comes down to understanding the fundamental goal, which is to create value. And sometimes that's incredibly complex, and depending on which area, which technology or industry you're involved in, can be subject to all sorts of constraints, regulatory constraints, financial constraints, technical constraints. And the way to create that value and become successful really has everything to do, in my view, in assembling the right talent and the right team. And so as much as you can be considered a serial entrepreneur, it really is a serial facilitator, someone who can use their skills to lead other people to accomplish great things. And that's the pleasure I take out of you know, leading a group of people, and that's how I relate to being an entrepreneur.
Yep, great. Other colleagues?
Yeah, when I didn't see myself as an entrepreneur when I started my career, when I started working for a biotech company. I enjoyed working in the lab. I enjoyed managing people, and I enjoyed the implementation of science. But quite frankly, after about 10 years, I got bored. And you know, moving up through the management is interesting, but it's not quite as exciting as being right on the edge, where you've got a lot on the line if you start a company. Mm-hmm. It's a lot more difficult than I thought it was going to be. You don't spend your time running a company. You spend your time really, I spend all my time raising money, which is not what I thought I was going to do.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I would say I definitely didn't see myself as an entrepreneur. And I'd say for me, it's there's an itch that needs to be scratched, and that's what I'm drawn to. I don't see what I want to see out there, so I now see myself as a catalyst to create it. And I'd say what I've learned about myself and probably the most valuable skill, I agree with the facilitation and bringing together a great team, but I think there's a persistence to it and a grit that you have to have, because the uncertainty, I mean, there's a cult of personality around entrepreneurs, and I certainly don't want to dispel it, but when you get down to it, you're about to walk into massive uncertainty, and if you don't have the perseverance and ability to deal with uncertainty in a particular way, and be able to paint a vision for others to come around, which is the facilitation side of things, then that's a very tough thing, and that's been learned over time, and I'd say it's what I never anticipated having to do, and what I've learned that is absolutely required to be successful.
Great. So I think some of you touched on this, but if you reflect, like, what one thing or skill or something do you wish you knew when you set out? That let's say you knew it at the beginning, things might have turned out differently. I don't know.
Yeah, let me address that. The thing I didn't realize you really need to know as an entrepreneur is how to sell.
Yeah.
I'm a tech guy, and whether I'm a good tech guy or a bad tech guy, I don't know. That's up for grabs. But we've done some things quite successfully over the years. Kenji got 5 products approved by FDA, so we had a track record of being able to identify, develop, manufacture, and sell drugs. But I was not part of the team that raised the financing for that. And financing, a lot of it, almost all of it, is about selling. And that was a skill that I didn't know you needed.
Yep. Anything to add to that?
I'd say the big surprise that I found was that if you build it, they don't come. I was like shocked. I watched Field of Dreams and bought into that concept like everyone else, but it was the actually thinking through so you've built it, now what? It's actually all about the distribution, and realizing that you better have a plan for how, at a cost-effective distribution, you're going to get this into the hands of whether it's the direct-to-consumer or an enterprise or government, or depending on the channels you're picking. But I'd say what I wish I would have known is that if you build it, they won't come. Mm-hmm. You've actually got to think through how to get it in someone's hands.
I think I certainly would reiterate the challenges around not being prepared for the challenges related to financing, because it can be very consuming, and I've I guess at times underestimated the amount of time and focus that's required. But I think in general, I'd say you have to plan not only for success but also for the inevitable failures, and make sure you can mitigate them. And that goes across the board. But I think the more experience you get, the more you tend to be prepared for whatever's going to potentially happen.
Yeah. Yeah, great anecdote. We just gave Steve his certificate from a year ago because we just didn't remember to give it to you. And he said, I've given my pitch 270 times. And this is like one reward for it, so that's like, there's only 365 days in a year, and that was a year ago. So you were pitching busy on weekends, perhaps. So Steve, you hinted at, we do have a cult around the entrepreneur as if you're the everything, and then, so beyond the team, maybe you guys can talk about what other supports could you not have done this without?
Simple.
Yeah.
My wife.
Yeah.
Or partner. So I started from a concept on a napkin and have built it from ground up, and that takes someone who's going to support you at home, because God knows I wasn't supporting for many of those years, and if you have the opportunity or fortune to have kids in the mix, that becomes a pretty challenging balancing act. And so I would certainly say having the support of family, friends, but also just a significant other who can put up with the ebb and flow and potentially a couple years of absolutely no revenue and a very risky proposition. And even when you start to get going, it's still a pretty risky proposition. I'd say, that's having the right foundation and personal support of a spouse, a partner, and then I would also add the right mentors and advisors who've been there and who can guide and shape and offer some wisdom, critical.
Okay. No one said alcohol or well, you did a little. No.
That's a given.
Other supports that you're reflecting on that you couldn't have done it without?
Yeah, I think for us, the mentorship piece that you mentioned is very important. You need to have a good board who are prepared to tell you when you're doing something wrong. And you need to find people who can bring you through the systems. If you're trying to get IRAP funding, you have to find someone in IRAP who can weave you through the system, because there's a bit of an art to it. If you want to work with OCE, again, it's a different ask. And so it's very important to establish and cultivate support groups. And then on the professional side as well, we have 9 different lawyers. We have a company of 20 people, and we have 9 different lawyers. They all have different specialties. We have a communications person who is not something you would think immediately, but is very important to present your company. And these are not skills you necessarily as the founders have, and you have to think about what type of outside support, and those people then can become your investors actually, which has happened to us, as well as your support and mentors.
So this is your extended team. This is like double the size of your core team.
Yeah.
Anything to add, Stephen?
I would extend it to the investors, especially if they end up inside your boardroom.
Yeah.
But we were very fortunate to have very committed and I think knowledgeable investors who understood what we were trying to accomplish and the complexity and sort of the challenging nature of what started out to be a Class 3 medical device. So I think that's benefited us, and certainly me, when I changed to the other side of the table in the boardroom.
So I think the origins of your 2 companies were some kind of a medical technology in an academic setting. Is that fair to say? Mm-hmm. And then you were more the napkin, and you saw an itch to scratch, and more from a digital health. So for the would-be entrepreneurs out there, maybe each of you walk us through from the moment there was some possibility of commercialization, where it kind of flipped from being an academic exercise to market, or from your napkin day to a first monetization event. And maybe you're not there yet. Just how much time is that?
We came up with the concept of our company in late 2007, applied to the Sanofi TyQuest competition, which focused us on understanding the market we were going into at the end of that year. And then we actually founded the company formally in April 2008. Okay. And since then, we've raised $6 million in equity and $6 million in non-dilutive financing in various rounds, continuous rounds, really.
Yep. And when would revenue be generated? Is that 5 years out?
We would generate revenue from products in 4 years from now. 4 years. But we have, during this period, created revenue by conducting contract work.
Right, off your platform.
Of our platform, yeah.
Good.
And just as an aside, I think that's one of the errors we made, that we've never presented the company as being revenue generating, because it's not our final product. But actually the company does generate revenues, which investors like. Yeah. And we failed to get that message over substantially.
Yep. Yeah. Steve, what's your timeline story?
Well, the company was actually spun out of an academic institution into a company in 2008. I joined the board in 2009 and assumed a CEO role in late 2011, not long after the company had achieved its Series A funding. And it's now 2015, and we're on the cusp of launching the product in Europe under a CE mark later this year. So okay. It's been a long, complex, and challenging journey, but one that will lead to, I think, tremendous success.
Good.
So 2008 seems to be a magical year on stage. This is interesting, we all won HealthKick last year, but we certainly didn't start last year. So Newtopia was founded in 2008. We began, so an interesting twist, we began generating revenue going direct to consumer beginning in 2010, and then realized, again, if you build it, they don't come, and you also need a brand. Those things help going direct to consumer. So we tried a number of different methods direct to consumer, and then made a pivot toward B2B, where we are now, and are achieving wonderful success. But I guess the point of the story is just starting to generate revenue. It's a wonderful feeling, except when it doesn't scale, it's not such a wonderful feeling, because you've got to then figure out what that means. And the magical pivot word is pretty much, you screwed up, your assumptions don't work, and effectively you restart the company again. And in some cases, you restart the team again. And so I've started Newtopia once, realized it wasn't going to work, restarted Newtopia, and it does work. So you have to, again, that's that perseverance side as well. So revenues don't always mean success.
Yeah, that's right. So, but you're starting to hum now.
That's rocking now.
They're rocking. Great. I think there's an interesting aspect of the $6 million non-dilutive and $6 million kind of more capital markets. Maybe you could explain what that means. This isn't all a health audience, but I actually think it's a very interesting nuance of the health venturing space that isn't the same as if you were starting, let's say, a traditional tech company. Is this availability of capital, because it's such a capital intensive industry in the biomedical?
Yeah, I mean, it's our cost to market of our first drug is about 90 million, which is very low actually for a drug. Typically it would be 450 up to 3 billion. So our approach is very economical, but it does require a lot of capital. And our strategy is to raise a $20 million round at the moment on top of the 6 we've raised so far. Follow that with a Series B of about 20, and then at that point partner with a pharmaceutical company who'll assume the phase 3 clinical trial costs, which will be about 60 million. So we've sought financing from non-traditional sources, and not your typical life science venture capital funds. And we've had most success from family offices, crossover ag funds, and then by securing non-dilutive funding from a variety of different sources, like the Gates Foundation, National Research Council, DARPA in the US, Defense Canada, a certain amount of that money we can invest in the development of our platform and our systems.
Great. Anything to add to that, Stephen?
I would just comment that there is an alphabet soup of programs available in life sciences for companies, young companies, to take advantage of, and I would encourage everybody to exhaust every avenue of the programs that are available to assist in non-dilutive funding to give you that runway as you go through the real challenge of trying to raise capital as you grow. And there's a number of different government programs at different levels of government. We've taken advantage of many of those, and I can sincerely say that we probably would not be here today without those programs.
Yeah, I would agree, and I would also just beware the bugaboo of dilution, and for newer entrepreneurs or would-be entrepreneurs, this concept of dilution can become an obsession. How much do I own? How much do I give away? At what point? Someone wise, who's still a mentor, said, you'd much rather own something, a small piece of something that's worth a lot, than a large piece of something that's worth nothing. And I oftentimes see entrepreneurs tying themselves in knots about how not to give away too much in a round. I think it's dangerous thinking. If you find a great partner who can leverage, to offer mentorship, the vital capital you need, and also jet fuel toward distribution, then dilution shouldn't be your main concern. It should be how quickly can you get a term sheet signed and move on to building value, as opposed to worrying about your own ownership stakes. So,
great.
Listen.
So if I think of the 300 young health companies we work with, there's probably 3 buckets. There's the scientists that discovered something and then converted it, or a clinician who saw something at the front line and then developed a company, or have done that like you guys, kind of serial. The middle bucket are the serial entrepreneurs from another sector who are deciding to enter health because it's high growth, it's really important, et cetera. And then the third, I think, are like Jeff, that we see a lot, who've had a run-in with our health system, themselves, their kid, their wife, their parent, and just can't believe when they've opened up and looked inside and want to come in and fix it. And so whether you out there are any of those three, I wonder if our panel can, just give one nugget of what do you want to think about if you think you want to build a health company in this market?
Think hard and think hard about that.
At least you didn't say don't do it.
No, think long and hard about it. There's lots of itches to be scratched. There's lots of moments of I can't believe this is the way it works. The fix isn't always as obvious, and I will say Ontario doesn't make it easy to get these things into market, and it is wonderful efforts of organizations like MaRS and others who are trying to make changes, and I've spent a lot of time on panels trying to advocate for those changes as well, because it's hard to make change, especially institutional change, and you've just got to be aware that what you see as a problem is someone else's dinner, and they're not going to want to give it up so easily. And so you've got to be prepared to wrestle dinner to get your idea out there, or potentially to go to other markets where dinner is being resized and changed, which is what we saw in the US with the Affordable Care Act, and now the Precision Health Initiative is just ripe for the taking. Dinner is being changed, and so it's much easier to get in as opposed to banging your head against Ontario, which sometimes you can destroy yourself in a company on the back of it.
Good.
It's going to cost twice as much as you think it will cost. It's going to take twice as long as you think it will take. And I think you have to think long and hard about everything that can possibly go wrong. Prepare yourself, because a good deal of it will go wrong. And then commit yourself to problem solving and going out and getting the help that you need to be successful. In life sciences and in medical devices specifically, this, for those of you that are involved in anything on the device side, there is a huge overhanging climate of regulatory compliance that you need to make sure you have figured out early. You need to make sure you've got a regulatory strategy early on so that you can set out on a path to completing and achieving compliance. After that, it's the fundamentals, including making sure you have enough capital and making sure you have the intellectual property and making sure you have the right team to take it forward.
But it's twice as exhilarating and, right? Yes, yes.
Absolutely.
Don, anything to add about advice?
What I say is, if you're going to address a healthcare issue, focus on unmet medical need. And by that, I don't mean a disease that doesn't have a cure. I mean, it's the provision of healthcare to a patient. So what we're doing is creating lower cost drugs so that the same drug is made available to a wider spectrum of the population, or that reduction in costs opens up funding for other drugs within the healthcare system. And that applies to diagnostics and devices as well. What I would say, if you have to think about what type of company, what type of person you are you going to swing for the fences, or are you going to bunt and get on first base? And this is where you've got to decide. And our company is swinging for the fences. Like, there is no going back. You don't go out and decide you're going to raise $90 million and do it with trepidation. So the exhilaration level in our company is 10, and the risk is I don't know what, but they go together. And so I think, as you as an individual, your rewards as an entrepreneur are different from the rewards within an organization. And your reward is the development of the success or failure of your organization.
Yeah, great. So you are all in HealthKick, and I'm sure you're part of other similar type of showcases. What have been some benefits or gains from participating in those? When we also tell our ventures, your only currency is your time, and you have to be really careful about what you do or don't do. What kind of upsides have you seen from participating in an event like HealthKick?
So I'll start. I'd say, back to the earlier comment about being in sales. An event like HealthKick offers you the opportunity. It's a platform. It's a stage, and generally entrepreneurs like stages. And if you don't, start to like a stage, because you've got to be good on a stage.
Yeah.
And HealthKick is a wonderful stage, and for its inaugural year and now what should be an even better second year, it's an amazing opportunity to hone your pitch, to get it down to how many minutes?
9 minutes.
9, sorry, I've been involved in 5, 7, 9. They get fun and creative when they get shorter. But just to hone it down to 9 minutes and to have a really educated and sophisticated audience. But it also allows you to sit with other groups in your stream to see how they're doing it. So you can pick up tips and tricks and how are they doing it, how are they presenting. And I actually found I probably learned more from watching others do it. I love doing it, but just it's a great opportunity to learn and to hone your sales pitch at the same time.
Yeah, good. Anything to add?
Well, I remember rehearsing that pitch many, many times, and I think what I began to learn was that it wasn't always to the same audience. Yeah. And you have to understand that in any room, you might have a very diverse audience and be prepared for that. So I think going forward from HealthKick, I was able to use that experience to help hone that message for the right audience at the right time. And I certainly got a lot of practice at that. So.
Good.
Yeah, I mean, I would concur with both those views. It's very important to have a very good slide deck. And I use a slide deck of about 18 slides, which I can do in 9 minutes, less than that. Can also extend it to a 20 or 30 minute presentation with the same slide deck. We were actually through one of these type of competitions. This was before HealthKick came about. We won some consulting time with Sean Wise, who's one of the backroom guys for Dragon's Den, and he helps companies pitch there, and that was extremely valuable enterprise. I went into his office, which is in Yorkville, and showed him the pitch deck we had that had been put together with a business development guy here in Toronto. And he said to me, you've got 12 slides here, and they're all absolutely have all the right material, and they all suck. And when he explained to me why, I understood that they're totally non-visual, because I'm coming to this without that sales experience, without the experience of a communications person as part of our team. And so these type of events do show you where some of your weaknesses are and help you address them. Yeah. And we actually had fun with the HealthKick, because part of the award was some time with Bereskin and Parr. And we actually used that to trademark a name for our platform system, which is something we wouldn't have done. So we had a little competition.
That's a legal IP firm?
Legal IP firm, yeah. Trademark lawyers. And we used it for trademark purpose. And we had a little competition with all our staff. That was fun. We chose a name that came out of the staff. And we had Janice Bereskin put in the award to actually patent, trademark that for us. So, these are things that help you, again, present your company in a more professional way.
So there's some purists out there who think that all these supports for entrepreneurs are not necessary, that the capital markets will solve for, finding, breeding, and selecting the best companies. And so I just wonder if what your thoughts are on that statement, and what if you think there's a value in places like MaRS or others, what supports are still not yet out there? What gaps still exist to build a thriving kind of entrepreneurial health ecosystem in Ontario?
So perhaps I could start with that. We had a meeting with a VC a couple of weeks ago, and they look at 500 pitches a year.
A year?
And they funded 5 last year. So I don't feel so bad about getting turned down so many times. But it's very important when you go in, you have about 30 minutes, and you're not going to get a second shot. So you have to have your materials together. You have to understand your business. You have to have a solid business plan because you get asked for that. You have to produce it. You can't say, I'll give you that in 2 months. Like, you've got to have it ready to go. You need financials that are credible. And so I think the type of supports that MaRS provide help you get these materials together. And without them, it doesn't matter how good your idea is, you have to sell it to someone.
Anything missing that you think some of these support providers could be filling to help give you guys more of an edge?
I mean, I think one of the things we do internally is work a lot on our presentation of materials, our website, and that's appreciated by people because it's the first thing people do is go to your website. Yep. And so, if there was greater capacity to support people in that area.
Yeah. Anything to add, fellows? What are your thoughts? If all this went away and you were on your own to develop your company, would it have made a difference? And what else could be done to support you guys?
Well, certainly HealthKick was, I think, a pivotal moment in our efforts to raise money because you really do recognize that you have to be totally on, 100%. And you have, as you said, a very limited window. And you can have the greatest technology in the world, the greatest story. But if you can't tell it effectively and you only get one kick at the can, you're done. So you really have to be crisp and ready and on when the time comes. And that requires a lot of intense focus and concentration and commitment to get the message across.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say, I think as an entrepreneur, you've got to be prepared to go it alone. And relying on MaRS to do it for you was not going to be a recipe for success. But I would also say it is certainly nice to have friends, and it's certainly nice to have supports. And I mean, we benefited tremendously from our relationship with MaRS, from all the services that the other two gentlemen have mentioned, and also just for an opportunity like this to be up on stage and talk to other entrepreneurs. I would say one of the pieces that are missing is probably, I would say some of the most valuable assistance to me is talking to other entrepreneurs, because having a network, almost like there's something called YPO, Young Presidents Organization. Well, having something for entrepreneurs or being part of those conversations are really valuable. And this is a great place to meet entrepreneurs or would-be entrepreneurs or others to have those conversations. So I'd say as a meeting place, I would say one area, and Zayna knows what I'm going to say, we definitely need more assistance connecting entrepreneurial ideas to capital and having a bit more of a well-greased machine to get companies that are a little further beyond the seed stage, that are into commercialization and looking for A's and or B's introduced and finding capital opportunities both in Canada and the US, challenging at the best of times. But I would say if MaRS could participate more in that area, it would be incredibly helpful.
Great, that's very consistent with what we hear a lot from other entrepreneurs. Okay, I think we're gonna wrap down the formal part. Maybe one last comment from any of you, whatever you want, something you were wishing you wanted to say, a funny story, I don't know what. And then we'll open it up to the group. So any last kind of reflection after we've been through this last 30 minutes together?
Okay, I was actually I was gonna play a song on my computer, but you can't do it here. It's
just sing it.
No, I'll get Graham to sing it. So it's the Rolling Stones. You can't always get what you want, but sometimes you get what you need. That's my what I think entrepreneurship is about. Yep. You shoot for the stars, but you got to realize what you need and use that.
Good.
I would say don't be afraid to ask for help, because for every problem you encounter, someone's probably encountered it already, and you probably find that they'll be more than happy to talk to you about that experience. And certainly for me, coming to events like this and just networking and meeting people at various stages of problem solving has helped me immensely. And I feel a duty based on that to pay it forward. So I think there's a great community here, a great sort of ecosystem that is producing lots of talent and lots of committed entrepreneurs. And there is more to take out of that by working together than trying to do everything on your own. And so I'd say don't be afraid to ask for help.
Great.
I would just, this is hard work, and I don't say that as self-serving because it's hard to do this, and anyone who says it's not hasn't done it or got really lucky the first time around. But it's also the only thing you can do that I've come across where the only limitation is you. You are it, and you are your own barrier. And if you push yourself, it's quite amazing what you can accomplish. So if you're interested in that kind of, it's you make it, you break it. And I agree with the team. And don't get me wrong, it's all built on team. And we have fortunately built a wonderful team over time. But at the end of the day, you are your greatest limitation in entrepreneuring. And that can be both terrifying or exhilarating depending on how you see and are comfortable with yourself.
Great. That's a good way to cap. Okay, so this is now your chance if you want to put some questions to any of our entrepreneurs here. Sure.
What programs do you recommend for applying for funding, and where do you go to apply? I assume there are websites.
In the life sciences specifically?
Yes.
Some of them you guys name drop, but I think there's a lot of acronyms.
It could depend on the stage of growth and the size of your company, because there are some qualifications you need to meet for some of these programs. But in general, there are programs like FedDev, there's IRAP, there's a whole alphabet soup here, but
MyTax,
MyTax, NSERC, OCE.
OCE, yeah.
Those are some big ones.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, if you play in technology, you don't want to forget about Shred, which is an opportunity for some really valuable tax credits.
Yeah. Okay.
But I would say each one of those, and it was rightly pointed out, has their own dynamic. And so finding someone who's done it before or who can help navigate going cold to those websites is tough. And so having someone who's done and successfully navigated through each of those would be the way to go.
The other thing we've heard a lot from the founders we work with, there's also like no end of small little things, like HealthKick was $20,000. There's a lot of like $15,000 if you're a female with brown hair from, Quebec. And like there's all these ways to encourage entrepreneurship, but sometimes the effort just to apply, even if you win, and then the tracking they ask for after is like $500,000 of capital time. So I think that's a part of money's being thrown at this, but sometimes it's actually hard to decide what to go after. Yeah, okay.
I'll also highlight some of the MaRS resources that we have. On the website, we have a search tool hosted by the funding portal. So if you look on the MaRS site, you can search by region as well as by sector. And last week's lecture, or 2 weeks ago, we had a lecture on alternate sources of funding. And our speaker, John Warren, talked a little bit about bootstrapping and crowdfunding and some of the other funding options that are available. So if you look in the video resources section, we have information on that, as well as the Shred program that was mentioned.
Yeah, the funding portal is quite a tool. It's got government and VC that are live and actively raising or funding. So, okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So maybe while we wait for somebody to come up, you all talked about growing your team. So what do you look for when you hire? Do your companies have a culture yet?
Yeah, we have the big buzzword, of course, is you've got to establish your culture, and that happens over time. You don't just wake up and there's culture. As much as that would be fun to see happen, but we have three simple rules. I have three simple rules for hiring people, and it's the lens I put everyone through when I have a conversation with them. It's passionate about something. It may not have to be about what we're doing, but boy, be passionate about something. Smart. This doesn't work unless you are, and no assholes. And I could put that another way, more politely, which is no divas. But just you've got to be able to work together. I mean, these oftentimes you're working in little, garages or basements or startup. We worked for 5 years in a storefront in Woodbridge. You've got to be able to work together and just be good people to work with. So those are the three things that we look for when we build a team.
Don, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, at PlantForm, we're basically hiring two different types of people, the Scots who drink and the Scots who don't.
Drink Scotch.
I don't know why I even started down that route. We hire people who are from academia. Like our group is actually Dr. Hall's group from the university. As he was approaching retirement, he wanted to create employment opportunities for his staff, and that was part of his driver for starting the company. So about half of our people are academics from the university environment. The other half are people from industry. And unfortunately, we have not hired people who do not have industry experience. So when we're hiring in people, these are all people who've worked in the industry and are bringing the culture of what it means to work in a company. And that's something we found that a lot of the people from academia, and I found this in other parts of my career as well, don't really understand what it means to work in a company in that team environment. Yep. And so we've had to introduce that culture by hiring people. And I'm pleased to have been able to hire some of my colleagues from Kenjin Corporation to form that team, but also some other people from outside.
Good.
Yeah.
Steve, any more to add?
Yeah, I've been fortunate as well to be able to tap into a network of colleagues I've worked with to bring them in and help accelerate our progress. I think there is a transition where a very small company goes through a shift in culture as it begins to embrace the serious challenge of commercializing a product and realizing you need a broad spectrum of talent, skills, and experience, and that culture needs to be welcoming of that talent wherever you can find it, especially when you're going from a very small group of people to a larger group. And that dynamic takes a while to gel, and then you're off and running.
Good. Question here.
Thank you, and thank you for all this insight. It seems to me that a highly regulatory environment is somewhat antithetical to a popular view of what an entrepreneur is. So how do you work within that environment and still get things done, quickly and innovatively? And how do you allocate scarce resources, the resources that come to you? It seems to me that as you scale up, and you need, X number of lawyers on your team. Well, how does that impact other aspects of the business that require development?
Two great questions.
So I could start addressing that. I mean, it's a good question and a very complex question, but our business is based on a core technology that's a platform from which we drive off product opportunities. And so what we're doing is financing the development of initially we were financing the development of the platform, and we continue to do that, but we're now at a point at which, from the regulatory point of view, we can put a stake in the sand and say, we no longer have to develop this system for our first drug, and we will use what we have at this point. And so what you then do is you have to figure out what the amounts of capital are you're required to move that project forward. And up to that point of having the proof of concept development and then the advancement of the product. And you need to have someone on your team who can realistically sit down and figure out the capital requirements. And you don't need it all on one day, and you won't get it all on one day. And you don't want it all on one day either, because you can add value to the company. So what we did was we developed a very, very detailed plan down to the level of costing out each single assay that's required for release and characterization of a drug to that point, and when that's used throughout our whole process. And you have to understand the steps, the big things. If it's contract manufacturing, animal studies, clinical studies, you have to have a good idea of what that costs to be realistic. And if you can't go before a VC if you don't have credible understanding of your costs.
Now, what do you want to do with their money?
Yeah,
and why?
Yeah.
Any other thing to add about the maybe perceived paradox between the entrepreneurial spirit and the wet blanket of the regulatory health system?
Well, innovating within heavy, regulatory, often arcane, is the very definition of health entrepreneuring. And if anyone's under the illusion that you're not going to walk in no matter where you're at, I'm a prevention player and have managed to move around what these gentlemen don't have the luxury of, but I hit the FDA and I hit GINA and I hit privacy, and I mean, we hit a ton. So it's the nature of this. You've got to be either yourself become an expert or have some people around you who really understand, because these aren't just little things. I mean, you run against them and they'll shut you down if you're not doing it right. So that's just the dynamic. And I would say in the earliest stages, those capital decisions, so I mean, we've been talking about VCs and Series A's, it took a while to get there. When it's starting and you've got to decide, amongst the very limited capital that you've raised and your burn, where to pay. Is it between the lawyer or the person you've hired or yourself? And those are really complex decisions. And oftentimes it comes down to a lot of gut feel. I wish having someone be able to tell you how to do all that would be wonderful, but I have to say a lot of it just comes down to what's burning, what do I feel I need to invest in, and you're constantly making trade-offs. And oftentimes have to be working with folks who understand that and realize that the professional advisors, I mean, we went 18 months owing individuals money and paid them all, but you've got to at least get up front, make people aware, and those who work with startups know that there could be long periods of time before getting paid.
Good.
Just to comment on the regulatory regime, it's very difficult to, especially in devices, but I would say in general, to innovate around compliance. I think the best thing to do is to research it adequately, to know where you stand early. And the first hire I made was my regulatory person. And that can pave the way. You can still be quite innovative. They're not mutually exclusive. But at least you'll know what the boundaries are and then how you can work to make sure you comply and still be innovative. I think you don't have a choice on one, and the other one is up to you.
Thank you for the insight. I have a question for Jeff. You mentioned about a big pivot from B2C to B2B.
Yeah.
So how did it happen? First of all, how did you realize that nobody's coming? Because you were saying that you generate revenue from consumers already. So what made you realize finally that, okay, the markets are giving me signals that it's not the right place? And how did you, in more concrete terms, how did you overcome all these in order to move from B2C to B2B?
Yeah, I will say, it was effectively a restart decision, and so it wasn't taken lightly. I mean, how do you know? There's this magical thing called cost per acquisition, and you start to realize that you've got to make sense out of how much is it costing to acquire these customers, and we just couldn't figure it out. So we were paying too much. We were attracting customers, but we were paying too much to acquire them. And our financial statements were just demonstrating it was costing too much to acquire, and we just didn't see a route to scale. Yet, when we took a step back, we realized that although we'd spent way too much to acquire these, in our case, 2,000 customers, the results we had were phenomenal for them. And so the problem wasn't the product, the problem was the distribution. And so we realized that if we just thought through, well, how can we acquire clients at a lower cost per acquisition, in our case, not developing our own brand, but relying on another brand, AKA an employer or an insurer, we should be able to put it all together. And so it was a faith in the results led us to saying, you know what, we're not done yet, and let's restart and try it again. And that's what we did.
But without the part that you have done in the consumer side, would you be able to go directly to the B2B market without that credibility that you have already established
through
the consumers?
Would have been awfully hard. Now, I would not suggest going a B2B plan starting direct to consumer. That's not a good way. You can build credibility B2B by doing pilots and establishing credibility that way, and which we, by the way, had to do. So when we made the pivot, we still had to do all the building up in a B2B landscape, which is why it's taken us as long as it has. But even if you are in the fortunate or unfortunate position of having to pivot, don't assume that the success you've had in one can't be helpful in the other, because in fact, what we've realized anecdotally is that actually the entire B2B market is moving toward a B2C orientation, and our experience selling direct to customers is coming in incredibly handy, because that's exactly what our partners and insurance companies want us to know and understand right now. So it's one of those, what goes around comes around, but you would have never known it starting, looking at it from where we were starting.
Here.
Yeah, I really appreciate your hearing your insights tonight, so thanks for that. I wanted to ask about what's your advice for dealing with the very long sales cycle that seems to be also present in healthcare technology? So it seems like there's a lot of regulation that you need to overcome, but then there's also like a really complicated sales process. So I was wondering, it seems like another barrier to get to revenue and to building your company. So I was wondering if you have any advice in that area.
I'd offer one suggestion to understand the economics of how people get paid. Depending on the jurisdiction that you're in, it can be a for-profit driven environment. It can be more of a socialized setting. You need to understand the dynamics of the reimbursement model in the healthcare system and how the money flows. And when you understand that, you might be able to optimize the challenges around a sales cycle by trying to be the most efficient in navigating through it. But it could be as simple as understanding the economics of reimbursement to optimize your plan.
I'd say understanding it is critical, and budgeting for it is critical, because if you have a run rate of 6 months and you have an enterprise sales cycle at 18 months, it doesn't take anyone without two hands to realize you're going to run out very quickly, and you're not even going to get to first base on your current run rate. So you just have to understand there are sales cycles, be savvy about them, budget for them, and there are tricks to maybe making them a little quicker, but a sales cycle is a sales cycle, and so you just have to be prepared for it, and I'd say have lots of irons in the fire so that you're not sitting on one waiting every single day, but have multiple and a diversified, much like investing, just have a diversified opportunities going on, so that it keeps you pretty busy.
I think one other thing, though, Jeff, you alluded to is knowing when to cut bait and switch, right? So, you can only bang your head against the wall in Ontario in certain so much, and then you went to the U.S. and things just took off, right? And it was good timing and a bunch of other things, but I think I find a lot of our founders that are based in Ontario really try to crack the Ontario market because it's right here. It's, half of it surrounds this building, but there, you should be thinking I am to be a global company on day one, and therefore you got to find your right customers from the world, not from your backyard necessarily. Any other questions? Should we wrap?
All right, thank you very much. Thank you to all of our entrepreneurs for joining us tonight and for sharing some of those valuable insights. Thank you, Zayna, for moderating a very rich conversation, and we hope that you're available for a few minutes to network with our audience members. So please do help yourselves to some refreshments. We've just put them outside of
Should we do the raffle?
Doors. Oh yeah, sorry, the raffle.
Okay. So there's the basket.
See this gentleman.
So who should, you want to, I don't know.
So, do you want to fold?
Pull it, Jeff.
Okay, I'll announce it. It's Diane, excuse me if I get your last name wrong, Donsick, I believe Diane Donsick. Diane here. No?
Is she being shy?
How do you spell it?
It's Diane, D-I-A-N-E. Last name is D-O-N-C-Z-Y-K. Sorry if I didn't say that right.
Okay, well, you're going to do another one.
Right. You'll have better luck.
Do it.
Conan Trilo? There he is.
Go, Conan, don't leave. All right, so we'll just talk to, so go see Katrin, she's right there, and she'll give you the code. So thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming today, for all you do for entrepreneurs and for our ecosystem and for health of society, and for your very, very important reflections on your journey so far, which I'm now understanding is only beginning. So join me in thanking our incredible panel.